Hey everyone, to all my fellow Canadians. So I'm sure you guys have heard about what had happened in London, Ontario, Canada. Obviously, the news has gone viral by now. Um, for a Muslim family had been killed, mowed down. A family had been killed, and just because they were identifiably Muslim. Now, regardless of where you stand on this issue, so you might have some thoughts on Islamophobia, whether it should be used. You might you might yourself not like Muslims very much, but I thought I'd share this really important message right now because I think that the individual Nathanial Veltman is really an individual we might be thinking about in terms of his mindset. Some people might call him crazy. Some people might think he had a breakdown. But I also believe, whatever he was, right? I'm sure to some degree, the gentleman did not have a picture, a right picture about Islam and Muslims, and hence I'm sharing this message. So if you want, you can share this as well with your network. I am Muslim myself, so I was born and raised here in Canada. Some people might say, "Oh, that means you're integrated. That means you're assimilated. You don't bring some of those back, those Eastern values." Actually, that's that's not actually what I would think. And in fact, when I look at a lot of my friends who were coming from the East, there's a lot of beautiful values and traditions that they bring back. And I'll give you one example right now, which is the family tradition, right? The importance of family. And I know family is important everywhere, but I've even heard, Canadians say this as well, that the respect that people show their parents is great. And I think this is something we can all agree upon, that, the way the media and the culture nowadays kind of diminishes the respect that we're supposed to have for our parents is not a good thing. I know that people in the West, Christians, Jews, people from the Abrahamic faith background, they tend to. There was a time where they had received they had either shown a lot of respect to their parents or received respect from their siblings and family, and unfortunately that's kind of eroding. A lot of those family values are kind of eroding. So that's really an area that Muslims and the West agrees upon. And so, look, as a Muslim, I'm pretty sure I have a friend of a friend who actually knows his family. I'm actually, you know, I'm pretty sure, I'm actually already talking to people a friend of a friend who actually knew the family. But what I will say is that even though I'm sad and I'm upset and it still hasn't, really sunk in yet, I think one thing that I've always wanted to invite Canadians to do is just to have more dialogue with Muslims. Okay, now this might sound cliche, right, to some of you guys. You might be like, "Oh, I'm already Canadian. I already eat shawarma. I already have a falafel once in a while. I know enough about Islam." Or maybe you saw a video once on social media, or you heard a few things from the Quran and a few things from the Hadith and from the Prophet Muhammad, and you're like, Islam is. You might even think Islam is an evil religion. You might think it's a bad religion. You might think, I really don't know. There's a spectrum of opinions about Islam when it comes to Muslims, right? In Canada, we can obviously see that. But I'm hoping that we all have a little bit of the idea to question ourselves sometimes. I know when I hear things about Christians or the West or about Jews, sometimes I question it, right? And I'm not talking about from Islam. I'm just talking about in general. I've heard Christians speaking certain ways about Jews. I've heard Jews speaking about Christians in certain ways. And sometimes I question those things. Okay? So going back to my point now, when you've heard something about Islam, you might have read something from a Christian website. You might have seen something from a video. You might have had a positive experience. You might have a Muslim coworker who's told you a little bit about Ramadan or a prayer, or you might have had a taste of Muslim culture and Muslim food. You might have a very positive view about Islam, or you might not just care. A lot of Canadians, they just don't care. They just kind of take all religions, they put it into one bucket, and they're like, yeah, it's not really for me. Okay, no problem. But still, if you're living in a world where 20% of the population is Muslim, if you're living in a world where, or even just in Canada, where there's a good chunk of Muslims, there's definitely at least 1 million. We know that. If you're living in a place where you have to interact with different people, it helps to know your neighbor. I myself, I took an initiative to learn about the West, right? Even though I was born and raised here, I still take initiatives to learn about people. And it helps a lot. It helps with my work. It helps with my relationships. It opens my mind a little bit. I don't need to agree. I'm not asking anyone here to agree with Islam and Muslims, just to make that clear. But at least to be open-minded enough, we all, including myself, need to be open-minded enough to have more conversations with Muslims and Islam, right? So if you know a Muslim, first of all, go and ask them a couple of questions about Islam. And if they can't answer it, ask them to help you with that answer, right? Just ask them 1 or 2 questions. I also think that some Canadians are generally afraid of Muslims, or they are not certain. There was a poll that came out a couple of years ago that said 50% of Canadians don't trust their Muslims, or if they had a Muslim neighbor. That was, I think, by the AMA. I'm not sure exactly the name, but you can Google it. And it was a piece of research that was done out of Montreal, I believe, out of Quebec. Now, and I think they did a poll across Canada. So my point here is that, where is that based off of? Maybe it's not prevalent in Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver, these bigger cities where you see a bigger Muslim population. But I'm sure that exists, right? I imagine, right? Especially, like, to put it frankly, if I was Canadian, right, or had very little exposure to Islam and Muslims, and I am Canadian, of course, but what I mean by that is, if I was didn't have any exposure to Islam, and I just relied on what I saw and what I heard, maybe, honestly, I can empathize with that, with why people mistrust Muslims, right? Because there's a lot of, you could say, negative information coming out about a negative image coming out about Islam and Muslims. And I know people whose their image of Islam and Muslims, they changed on a completely 180 degree just by sometimes an experience, or sometimes reading about Islam, or sometimes just kind of questioning their thinking, and even kind of within their own tradition, if you believe in God, just praying to God, right? So I do want to put that out there, that a lot of this stuff can be dispelled just by questioning our own thinking, and why we might fear, why we might have this fear. I don't know if many of you know this, and some of you probably already do. Actually, to be honest with you, I find a lot of there's more Canadians that I think are educated about Islam, but I will say a good portion of Canadians still either get their source of information from either like religions class, like from college or university, or the internet, and it could be specifically from their own faith-based website, so kind of like third-party sources, or through their conversations with Muslims. So they still have a better understanding, that I would say, than I would say, like Americans, but it's still, I think, at a service level. And so I'll also say that this message really isn't just for, it's not just for people who are not Muslims, so my fellow citizens, or those who are outside of the Muslim community, or non-Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics. This message is actually for Muslims as well too, right? Because I think from this, one thing that Muslims need to learn is, we need to learn how to, first of all, we need to research our own faith, right? We need to also learn how to articulate our faith, learn how to communicate our faith. And communication is key. I think about a relationship, right? Where a husband and wife, you often need to have, some level of communication for that relationship to be healthy, for there to be an understanding. So likewise, in this society today, in 2021, you need Muslims, at least on our part, to be able to communicate with their neighbors, various institutions, and society at large. So that being said, I'm going to leave you guys with some free resources to learn Islam. Okay, these are not all the resources. So resources, of course, there's a lot more. But before that, there's one thing that we do in the Islamic tradition, and I feel like anyone can do this, even if you're an agnostic. Okay, and that is, I think, like I've talked to atheists already. Like most atheists by default are agnostics, because they'll say that we don't have concrete proof that there is no God. Otherwise, they'd have an issue with, the scientific method and all that stuff. So most atheists, by admission, they're agnostics themselves, and they say, you know what? Yeah, there could be a God or whatnot. I don't know. And a lot of Christians who already believe in God, a lot of Jews who already believe in God, Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, Catholics. I'm sorry if I left anyone out. Jainists. Whatever your belief is, people can typically either believe in a God or a higher power, right? As you want to put it. Now, what I would do, and in the Islamic faith at least, it is customary, it's tradition. It is, we're almost commanded, as a show of humility and to avoid arrogance, to actually ask God, to turn to God first and foremost. To turn to God first and foremost for what? For guidance, for patience, for success. And we're supposed to turn to God. Obviously in Islam we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorified be He, the one who is perfect. We're supposed to turn to God before anyone or anything else. And that's because if you know a little bit about Islam, it's heavily based on monotheism. Now you might be thinking, okay man, he's sounding like a street preacher right now or something like that, right? Which is fine, but the reason I'm merely mentioning this point is because when I see the media, right, they always mention Ramadan, they mention Hajj, they mention prayer, but they never mention this one important key topic, which is like the engine behind Islam. It drives everything else, which is Islam and monotheism, right? We really consider ourselves, followers of Abraham. And for those who are familiar with Abraham a little bit and the biblical tradition or the New Testament or Old Testament or Torah, you know that Abraham is a very important figure. And Abraham or Ibrahim in the Arabic language is actually mentioned in the Quran. And if I may also add, if you didn't know, some of you may already know, many of you already know this, is that Adam, Noah, David, Abraham, Moses, Jesus Christ, and lastly the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Peace and blessings be upon the Prophet Muhammad, and may the peace and blessings be upon all of the prophets of God. So these prophets that I just mentioned, they're actually mentioned in the Quran. In fact, chapter number 19 of the Quran is named after the mother of Jesus Christ. Okay? So, again, here's some free resources. Again, if you're Muslim, what I recommend is getting acquainted with these resources. Sometimes a lot of Muslims don't know their faith, right? And that also leads to extremities in life. What do I mean by that? Is like you can go very far left or far right, right? You just kind of like, off the rails. I find that actually Islam helps balance you out because it gives you a structure by which to understand and study your faith and navigate yourself. So again, if you want to learn about the beliefs of the people that were slain, and from what I've heard so far is that they were actually really good people, mashallah, the family that died. I heard that they were spiritual, mashallah, tabarakallah. They used to go to the mosque. So may God have mercy on their souls, and may they rest in peace. Allah yarhamuhum. So again, I think the three reasons I would say, or before I get into the three resources, the reason I would say one should study these things is because I think the killer, Nathanial Veltman, and I'm still looking for a picture of him, right? But like, what did this 20-year-old look like? This 20-year-old is like a guy who could have been in a youth group, right? That would have been a better way to spend his time. I know people are going to come out and say, well, maybe he had, severe mental issues. He wasn't representative of the Jewish faith or the Christian faith or this and that. We don't even need to talk about him, regardless of where you stand, because it's not going to get us anywhere. Some of these discussions are really useless, especially where we spend our time on social media, and that's a reminder to myself actually. But I pray that we're guided more to a more positive future, and I think humility is the key, right? Being humble and saying, you know what, maybe I don't know something. A couple times a Christian has corrected me when I've spoken about their faith. So in my discussions with Jews or Christians or whatever, or I have to go back to what the Christian scholars say, how they see their faith. Of course, if there's an explicit verse in their Bible, then of course I'm going to ask questions about it, and so if something doesn't make sense, I'll generally ask them without challenging them. Of course, I usually ask things in a respectful way in my own discussions. But what was the point I was trying to make again? I can't remember now. But basically, I wanted to leave you guys with these 3 resources. So I think I mentioned one of them already, which is, if you got a Muslim at school or work, don't be afraid to ask them a question. Because listen, Islamically speaking, they are actually obliged to answer your questions. Okay. Now they don't always know everything. Just to be clear, they haven't studied sometimes, and even myself, I'm still studying. I consider myself a layperson, even though I'm in touch with a lot of different imams and community centers and mosques and people who have studied overseas and locally here in Canada. But I realize there's a lot to learn, from the Arabic language to manners to beliefs to the whole Islamic studies curriculum in and of itself. So it's just like, I'm not trying to compare Islam to Christianity, but with Christianity, you obviously have to go through a process before you become a pastor or a cleric or whatever, right? So it's always better to talk to a person of knowledge when you're asking questions about Islam. So the second thing you can do is like if you have a local mosque near your area, just give them a call. And ask them either for a free Quran, ask them if you can come and visit, ask them when the next open house is. I know it's the pandemic right now, but try to build that relationship. I promise you, this is something that will be really valuable to you. Okay, knowing about Islam, like even if you just want to take an irreligious perspective, I mean, there's a famous documentary called 1001 Inventions, and if you look at even the English language today, you look at algebra. Right? Where did that word come from? Right? Algebra. Right? Some of our English words actually came from the Arabic language. They came from Islamic culture. Ibn Haytham. There was a BBC article on Ibn Haytham. Okay. Muslims were, if you didn't know this, they were a dominant superpower at one time. Not like the superpowers we see today that kind of butcher innocent people. And again, I'm not going to get into politics right now, but I'm not saying that Muslims were perfect throughout history. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm definitely saying that there were some amazing things that came out of the Islamic nations. And one of the best, obviously, that we would say, the best nation would be the nation or the era of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and his disciples, or as we say, companions. Okay, so going back to the topic here, see if you can get a hold of the copy of the Quran, see if you can get a hold of the copy of the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, and then there's also the 40 Hadith. The 40 Hadith is just a book that has one of the most popular. It's a book that has some of those popular narrations, okay, from the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That just means peace and blessings be upon him. So, now again, I'm not asking when you read the Quran, I ask you, of course, to read it with an open mind, open heart. But I'm not asking you to agree with everything. I'm not asking you to dissect, try to read it with an analytical mind, or try to pinpoint this or pinpoint that. Just read it by yourself. Read it by yourself in your room. Obviously, to read the whole thing, it can take you a long time. It took me actually a couple of years. What I would recommend is actually just choose a couple of chapters. Choose a couple of short chapters. The first chapter, the Fatiha, is probably the most important. It's the opening. It's like a prayer. And I believe it's Surah number 41. I can't remember which one it was. Again, definitely the beginning of chapter number 2. So Surah Baqarah of the Quran. I would recommend reading the first 30 verses or so. First 30 to 40 verses. You can even read the whole thing if you want to. But I understand a lot of people are not going to have time to do that. And I think there was one more chapter of the Quran. I'll put it in the description, inshallah. So yeah, Surah Maryam as well too. The chapter 19 named after the mother of Jesus Christ, alayhi salam. So we have a lot of respect for our mother, Mary, alayhi salam. And if you don't know that, then please know this. The way we speak about Jesus Christ, alayhi salam, peace and blessings be upon him, it has to be very, very well mannered, very highly respectful, and very considerate. So that's one thing. And then finally, sorry for being long-winded here, guys. Finally, these are some YouTube channels I'd recommend. The Dean Show, number one, it's based in the USA. They do interviews with Muslims across the globe, traditional Muslims, conservative Muslims. So, I think a lot of things when I talk to people who are not Muslim, there's a trust issue sometimes. Like, are we just gonna tell them what we want to hear? Are we gonna pick and choose verses? And yeah, you have to take Islam at full face value. Listen, and this is what I always tell to Muslims too: is speak the truth. When you're talking to somebody, make sure we listen to their question properly. Make sure that you never assume or make any assumptions that, or do they like Islam? Do they not like Islam? How much do they know? Are they here to debate? No, always have positive thoughts. Don't get into a debate right away. Sometimes, yes, a little bit of debate can be healthy, for sure. A little bit of back and forth can be healthy because we need to challenge our thinking. But at the same time, what you want to do is just listen to the questioner and then speak the truth. So Islam, yes, we believe is a religion of peace, but we also believe it's a dignified religion that covers all aspects of life. So yes, Muslims defend the oppressed. Yes, Muslims, we have an Islamic economic system, or if you want to say that. We have aspects of spirituality, what you can eat and what you can't eat. But while a lot of people might think that Islam is I know I've heard this sometimes, that it's restrictive, it has too many regulations. Once you're actually in Islam and a practicing Muslim, you realize that's not true at all. Most things are actually permissible, and it's sometimes just those societal pressures that we feel sometimes, like boyfriend, girlfriend, or excessive liberal culture and media and entertainment. These I think that even Christians and Jews and many others will agree that this is just something of a modern phenomenon that has come about, that we probably all need to can acknowledge that there's issues with, right? It's great that we have technology, that's fantastic, but just like we wouldn't give a 10-year-old a mobile phone, some of us adults need to be careful of our mobile phones, right? So it's unfortunate that of course, while we have certain freedoms, we need to understand how to navigate these freedoms. And that's what Islam does, is it gives us a set of laws and regulations. And even Muslim scholars, even though you might think, okay, Islam is 1400 years old, but believe it or not, one of the amazing things about Islamic law is it's very, very adaptive. So technology is not impermissible in Islam. In fact, it's a good thing. It's a positive thing, but it should not interfere with our worship of God. It should not interfere with our family. It should not, and that's actually a reminder to myself, to be honest. So yeah, the Dean Show is the first channel I'd recommend. After that, IERA stands for Islamic Education and Research Academy. Okay, so there's a UK branch, there's an American branch, and there's a Canadian branch. The Salam Initiative is another great YouTube channel. It's based out of the UK. And they kind of do real discussions with real people. So they do discussions with people from the Jewish background, like Hasidic Jews, and people from the Christian background, and they're really raw, unscripted conversations. So it's really nice to see that. You can find a lot of them on YouTube now, I think. So I really don't think for us as Muslims, there's no excuse now, to not have knowledge. I've gone through myself, all praise belongs to God. Alhamdulillah, I've gone through the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. So I've read one book, I've listened to a few audio series, I've gone through a course, and I'm still actually intending to go through it again. And that's one of the most powerful things. So in addition to the Quran, you have to go through the Quran, try to keep a relationship. I'm talking to the Muslims now. Keep a relationship with the Quran, and if you can, go through the biography of the Prophet Muhammad.
that in the event itself, I think for me, was one of the most amazing miracles. And again, even if you're not a Muslim, you can actually benefit from such a biography. Michael Hart, I believe a man who's a Christian, who's often quoted as someone who ranked the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the number one human being. Now, I'm not saying that Michael Hart is a authority, and that, personally as a Muslim, I don't think we should care what others say about our faith. We need to look at our own faith for itself. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about the Prophet Muhammad? But I just thought that's an interesting point for non-Muslims to actually read the biography for themselves. If you want to read a shorter version, there's of the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. There's also a book written by Cat Stevens, aka Yusuf Islam, right, the famous singer who converted to Islam. So go through these channels. If you don't find the answer that you're looking for, right, if you heard this or heard that about Islam, then certainly ask and try to contact a knowledgeable Muslim. There's also like live YouTube channels where you can actually ask your questions. I'm laughing because it's like, we didn't have this like 10 years ago, right? But this is amazing. So some of these channels are called EF Dawah, so DAWAH. EF Dawah. There's also SC Dawah, DAWAH. Again, just SC. The SC stands for Speaker's Corner. So check out those channels. They regularly have like live sessions going on that you can check out. Again, thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope you guys all stay safe in the pandemic. Again, I don't even know if anybody's gonna listen to this, but one thing I'll say is that I've always just wanted to. And I hope, inshallah, God willing, that over the years, the Muslim community can go across Canada to visit Indigenous communities, Christian communities, Jewish communities, everybody, and just kind of like break bread, have a meal, have a sit down. It doesn't have to be, necessarily initially about, hey, we're right, you're wrong, or, a debate or discussion, but just to first actually get to know each other a little bit. And then I think definitely we'd like to welcome and listen to your questions. And dawah, I think sometimes we need to I don't know if Christians are I don't know if the people listening are scared of dawah, but it just means invitation. So I invite everyone to learn Islam first, of course. If somebody wants to accept Islam, that's their choice, right? We have freedom in this country. Of course, you can essentially follow whatever you want. If you want to worship a donkey, somebody could worship a donkey, God forbid, right? But I wouldn't recommend that. And the reason I wouldn't recommend that is because, everything that we can think of in this earth is subject to something else, is limited, is never gonna be, the thing that we're gonna go back to after death, right? So it's kind of a heart-to-heart reminder for myself as well, that I really believe that we have a purpose in this life. We don't just exist, and we're not just going to go die and become mega food and that's it. For me, someone to say that there's nothing after death is as nonsensical as believing that there's a spaghetti monster in the sky, because there's no evidence for that. But I think once you take a hard look at Islam, and you kind of put away with whatever you've heard in the media, or what kind of maybe even propaganda you've heard, you really come out with a different image, right? And it's actually quite a spiritual image. And again, I don't think that whatever fears that anyone has, or do I need to give up my friends? Do I need to give up my family? Do I need to give up my lifestyle? Don't think about that. Think about God Almighty. Think about following the truth. Think about struggling against your soul, your desires. Think about paradise after. Think about life after death. Think about death. This world is always going to be limited. It's always going to disappoint us. But I think that there's really a lot of beautiful things in Islam, and I hope, inshallah, Muslims can go across Canada one day and share these kinds of messages, both on what we agree upon with other communities and groups, but also we can respectfully lovingly discuss what we disagree upon. Again, thank you everyone for listening to this long message. I know it's super long. Have a great day. Stay safe. Cheers.